When fewer children are born, it affects everything, from our welfare systems and workforce to the very personal pain of involuntary childlessness. This isn't only about biology, it's about the sustainability of the society as a whole. Do you know someone who has struggled to conceive? Most people do. This is Business Review Life Science. Our focus is innovation, challenges, and the future of health. Today's topic is involuntary childlessness, public-private partnerships as a catalyst for innovation. I'm your host, Søren Vejby, and my guests today are Eva Hoffmann, Professor of Functional Genomics and Reproductive Health at University of Copenhagen, Denmark. Welcome.
Thank you.
I'd also like to welcome Kelle Moley, Vice President of the Science and Medical Organization within Ferring Pharmaceuticals, a leader in reproductive medicine and maternal health. Kelle is the lead of reproductive medicine and maternal health. Welcome.
Happy to be here.
And also welcome to Anette Steenberg, CEO Medicon Valley Alliance, the cross-border life science cluster organization for Medicon Valley, the dynamic binational region embracing Eastern Denmark and Southern Sweden. Welcome.
Thank you, Søren.
Okay, so I think we should just start on top of everything here. Why are we seeing a steady decline in birth rates across the world? I don't know if you want to start, Eva, or...
This is a trend that we've been seeing for a long time. And it's a trend that is really multifactorial. It's very complex. It's sociological. It's also to some extent medical as well, because it means that in some cases, as we see shifts in behavior of when we have children, for example, that it sometimes goes against the biology that we have.
Like how?
Well, for example, delaying childbirth. That's both actually, and perhaps surprisingly, both a male and a female, or a man and a woman, deciding together to delay childbirth, perhaps for affordability. It could be getting an education, and biologically that means that for women they might be a bit too old or advanced in age in order to conceive, at least straightforwardly.
So that's a primary factor I can hear, that we are delaying childbirth compared to decades ago.
Yeah.
Kelle?
Yes, I think it's been seen in across many countries. I think the average age for childbirth 10 years ago was closer to 26. Now it's 29. At least that's globally. So this is a growing concern. But I think too, as Eva said, age is a key factor, but there are other factors. It is the leading, at least in women. The age is the greatest predictor for infertility. Once you get over 35, your rates go up with infertility quite dramatically. This is biological, as Eva said, but there's also factors such as environment. We know that smoking, for instance, causes premature menopause, and other pollutants can also lead to infertility. Food and diet and obesity is directly correlated with infertility. And that's something that's seen in both men and women and attributed to both male and female infertility. So in the scheme of things, if you think of the whole couple, 30% of infertility is due to a female cause purely. The other 30% is due to the male cause solely. And the last 30% is a combination of the two, sort of the perfect storm for some couples.
So many factors here to consider, correlations and mostly, of course, as you said to begin with, even the age, and you also mentioned that, Kelle. So what are the most pressing consequences of this trend? I'm looking at you, Eva, again. What is our main concern here?
Well, I think there's several concerns here, and as Kelle said earlier, deciding when to have children is obviously important, but in some cases as well, you can't have children as you advance in age. And that means, for example, that we have lower birth rates. That would affect our economy. It affects our society. It affects also, of course, the actual infertility treatments themselves that some of the couples will actually undergo as well in order to try to conceive. So there are many consequences that impact our society and the way that we live and the way that we organize ourselves. And of course, health as well.
Okay, so once again, many factors actually that are concerned here when we're talking about this topic. So It probably lies in your answer a little bit here, but let's emphasize on it or expand on it. So why is it so important for policy, innovation, and business to align in tackling the fertility crisis, Kelle?
Yeah, I mean, I think as Eva said, it's not just women's health or male health, it's the society. And, this sustained infertility reality that we live in will produce a contracted population with fewer young people and more disproportionately larger older population, which means a shrinking workforce, less productivity, and ultimately a shrinking gross domestic product. And that's been seen already in several countries. And that's why so many countries in the world are investing in this area. The reason why it's important for industry to get involved is because the funding in this field has been dismal. Reproduction, infertility has been at the bottom of the list as far as research that's funded. And so the partnership between public and private is necessary in order to stimulate development in this space and to really trigger innovation. And I think the close relationship of those two factors really is key to seeing this infertility decline slow.
But can you put a few words on why has it been dismal, the research here on this field? Is because it's a new field or
well,
why?
no. I mean, we could spend a whole hour talking about that. That's usually what I talk about.
Yeah. Well, I would like to do that, but maybe you could just keep it a little bit short for now.
No, I think overall, women have been considered just small men for a century. Medicines were prescribed at just smaller doses, but really they failed to understand the physiology of women is completely different. We have estrogen, which is the elixir of life in my mind, but it does keep us in a different category than men. We have different physiologic responses to heart drugs, to clotting drugs. We have a very different profile in cancer treatment as well. And that's not recognized because women have not been involved in clinical trials. We were banned from clinical trials from the 50s until the 90s. So there are no drugs on the market, at least from that era, that have ever been tested in women. And as a result, there's been a lack of pharma interest in this space because the science just wasn't developed enough. So in some ways, it is a new field. We don't have a lot of information about simple biology, as we were speaking, infertility. We know there's lots of causes, but we don't know why. And that's why it's so critical for more research and involvement in this space by pharma as well as by academia.
Yeah.
And
Anette?
I suppose I could just add that the fact that Kelle just said that there's actually it makes two to make a baby. Not really a big surprise. But in terms of research, it has been very much focused on the woman. And only recently there's been more research also and knowledge of the causes that also stems from the men. So I think traditionally there's been a lack in that sense, or infertility has been seen as a woman's disease.
So it's also a lack of understanding of the issue, really, basically. Yeah, Eva?
Yeah, as Kelle and Anette have here said, it's a third of the couples who come for treatment, where you have the woman who has a diagnosis, a third for the men, and a third we don't know. And I think that we need to start treating this as a couple, and we also need to elucidate the causes because, as Anette said, there are male factors as well here. And the reason I think that we are seeing that there's not been an investment in the male side for infertility has really been the development of a specific technique where you can take a single sperm, you can inject it into the egg. It's called intracytoplasmic sperm injection. So the developments on the male side for infertility has pretty much been to try and develop surgical methods so you could go in and extract a single sperm or a few sperm cells and then take these into the laboratory and inject them into the eggs. And then that was the treatment. Rather to try and understand why is it that so many men are infertile or subfertile in terms of their production of sperm.
Maybe you can also expand a little bit on this because that also means that there needs to be more research, I guess, on the area to get better results or better better science on this. So how can the research community and the healthcare systems and industry continue to work together to face this challenge head on?
As Kelle said earlier, the third, male, female, and then unknown, we can really start working together by having more and better research and also knowledge about the causes. Because if you have causes, you can start providing better diagnosis, you can start developing treatments, and eventually, where needed as well, you can also start investing in drug discovery programs. We are just very, very behind in this field because we don't even have basic knowledge of what causes some men not to have sperm production. And I think that without that knowledge, you can't develop better treatments or even better diagnoses.
What role is the Medicon Valley or the Øresund region playing in addressing reproductive health issues? Why is it well positioned to lead here, Anette?
Well, Medicon Valley Alliance is lucky to be the project leader of this project called ReproUnion, which is almost 15 years old. It started, 15 years ago between researchers and doctors from the southern Sweden area, the University of Lund, University of Malmö University, and Hospital of Skåne, together with the University of Copenhagen and all the universities in the capital region, together with Ferring. And they have made this consortium where they are fighting infertility. And the focus is, as mentioned, within these three areas, both the male, the female, and the couple's infertility combined. Because we've been doing it for so many years, it had built up world-class resources. I mean, we have two experts here, Eva from Copenhagen University and Kelle. We've been so lucky to attract to Denmark as a well-known world-class researcher in this field. And we have really built up world excellence, a center of excellence within infertility in this region, because there's been so many years of collaboration across borders. We've been able to attract the world's biggest infertility conference, ESRA, to Copenhagen twice. Also because they know there's a lot of research within infertility going on in this region. You started talking about the collaboration between public and private and why it's important for industry to get involved, and then moving on to the fact that infertility issues is both a male, a female, and a couple's challenge. And this is exactly what our project is all about, and that is why our project ReproUnion is so special and unique. And the uniqueness in it is that it looks at all three areas, and not just the female infertility. It also has an area of looking into the male infertility. And we're also looking into, via a biobank we have developed, into different samples both from women, men, and couples. So there's opportunities to research in all aspects, all areas.
This is the podcast Business Review Life Science. We focus on innovation, challenges, and the future of health. Today's topic is involuntary childlessness, public-private partnerships as a catalyst for innovation. I'm your host, Søren Vejby, and my guests today are Eva Hoffmann, Professor of Functional Genomics and Reproductive Health at University of Copenhagen, Denmark, and Kelle Moley, Vice President of the Science and Medical Organization within Ferring Pharmaceuticals, and also the lead of reproductive medicine and maternal health, and Anette Steenberg, CEO, Medicon Valley Alliance. You were talking about, Anette, ReproUnion and what it is. Do you need to say a little bit more about it? Or because I actually, to be honest, didn't really know ReproUnion before this podcast.
No, I mean, I think the uniqueness is that we have managed a cross-border between both researchers from universities, researchers from hospitals, and from pharmaceutical industry in what we call a triple helix collaboration, but the fact that we collaborate between academia, hospitals, and private industry. And in doing so, added on a cross-border has basically created both a critical mass and a virtuous circle of building this center of excellence within research within fertility. This project is funded by the EU Interact. They fund cross-border collaboration of this area within public-private collaboration. It's also supported by the regions from Region Skåne and from Region Capital. And Ferring has also been supporting this project for many years.
Okay. Kelle?
I think Ferring, this is our premier partnership. We really value the fact that we can work with such outstanding scientists in both male and female infertility. This is something very unique among pharma companies, that we have such close alliance. We've hosted several events at our headquarters here in Soundport, out in Kastrup. And we had especially one last year for the Tour de Health, which was an event that attracted 13 different countries to come hear about the way that Denmark handles healthcare. And one of the showcased speakers was one of our ReproUnion investigators. And I think we really are not only a unique partnership, but we're in a very unique environment, as Anette said, where infertility has come to the forefront, at least in Danish discussions and in the Danish society. Denmark is currently at a replacement rate. Again, total fertility rate is basically the number of live births. And this is to maintain the population that we're at in the world, it has to be between 2.1 and 2.3. Mm-hmm. And Denmark is 1.6. And in comparison, there are the average number in the EU is about 1.6. But there are countries like Germany, Italy, Spain that are 1.2 or 1.3. The lowest in the world is South Korea, which is 0.8 total replacement rate. So it is something here that Denmark is taking very seriously, as we have heard in the last year with the coverage of infertility and IVF.
I might just also add to what Kelle just said, that we experience a lot of international interest in learning more about this collaboration, because it is such an important issue, and especially from some of the countries like mentioned South Korea or Japan and China, where the average birth is very low, I guess close to 1 in the other 2 countries as well.
Just for if you have a listener who doesn't really know what IVF is, could you just please, or one of you just tell what it is?
So it's in vitro fertilization is what it stands for. And it's when you actually take out the eggs, the oocytes from a woman, and you put them in a dish with sperm and allow fertilization to happen. And that's the simple, most conventional way. Yeah,
I think people know the process probably, but not really maybe not the definition of it. Maybe you could expand a little bit on Ferring and what you are doing.
Yeah, Ferring Pharmaceutical is a mid-sized pharma company that's privately owned. It was founded in Malmö 70 years ago, moved over to Copenhagen, I think in the 90s, and now our headquarters is in St. Prix, Switzerland, but our research and development headquarters is here in Copenhagen. So we are, in the middle of this environment of both Danish and Swedish, and in our company as well. We have about 800 employees here at this facility. Our specialty is infertility drugs. So we make drugs for women and men for infertility. We have 2 other specialty areas. One is gastroenterology, and the other is uro-oncology.
I just want to ask you, Eva, I think you probably are the best to answer this question. So RUBIC, what is that, and how does this unique biobank contribute to uncovering new insights in fertility science?
So the ReproUnion started an infertility cohort and biobank, and that's called RUBIC, several years ago now, in order to achieve 3 things, really. One was get really high quality data. That's also clinical data. It's our register data that we have in Sweden and Denmark. And because we have the capacity, we could actually build up a relatively large cohort as well. So the aim is to have 2,500 couples in Sweden and in Denmark enrolled. This is very ambitious and it's going very well. It obviously is something that needs long-term support and funding. But the reason that it's important is really for two other things, and that is that this is across borders. And that means that within two relatively modestly sized countries, we all of a sudden now have a cohort that has a size where you can actually do studies that are well-powered. And by that I mean that typically what you would do is say, I'm interested in this kind of disorder to do with infertility. It could be the woman, it could be the man. And you build up some patients, maybe 20 who are healthy, 20 who are not, who have the specific disorder you're interested in. You collect some material that might be relevant, and that's it, you do a study. What we're doing with RUBIC is take a completely agnostic approach where we go out and collect everything we can, and then we go into the registers, we look at the diagnosis and say, okay, what can we now start learning in this big data type approach? And because it's such high quality, because it's from clinics, it means that we can learn a lot. This is something that is then coupled to policy as well. It needs to be coupled to long-term innovation as well, where companies such as Ferring or startups or other places in the world who are doing research but also innovation can come in and say, we've found this new drug target, we would like to test it on some cells or some material. We can't go out and collect this, but RUBIC, they have so and so many cases and so many controls that we could get access to. Could we please test our drug on this material to see if it actually works at that level before we go to very expensive clinical trials and safety studies to develop it further. So RUBIC is really a vehicle for being able to also innovate, conduct basic research as well in a very, very different way than we currently can. So we can go in parallel and not just in series every time we need a study done on something. It does require long-term policy and funding as well, of course, but I think that this is the way to go, the way that we need to start our innovation and also research to try and get further along. We can't just keep on doing what we've been doing, not unsuccessfully, but certainly at a very slow pace because the funding hasn't been there. So this other way of doing it with RUBIC is certainly something that I think is inspiring, and it's also very innovative.
Fantastic. What are some of the biggest challenges and opportunities when it comes to attracting investment and building collaborations in this space, Kelle?
For pharmaceutical companies, we look for areas that have a lot of science behind them and have targets that we can drug. Basically, a druggable target is something that we know the mechanism of action. We create a chemical that will fit into that particular receptor or area. But in as we talked about, the science in both male and female infertility is so scant that we don't have any targets that are very druggable yet. We're moving closer towards that, but that requires investment. And that's where, the partnership like we have with ReproUnion allows us a little bit more flexibility to use the tissues in RUBIC, to use the science, so we don't have to create that ourselves in-house. We can collaborate and do that with our academia. So that's what we're moving towards, and I think that's what is the unique relationship between Ferring and ReproUnion.
And how can the private sector help ensure not just reproductive health, but also a more sustainable workforce and stronger social systems in the long run?
I mean, that's the thing about infertility. It happens to working-age women.
Yeah.
And so this is, I want to call it that, but it's a disabling disorder in some cases. There's lots of appointments you have to make to go to the doctor. There's lots of, there's maternity itself that can be having to keep the woman home throughout the time of the pregnancy. But I think the thing that Ferring is doing to mitigate that is we give full fertility coverage, and we also allow women to take full maternity leave, and the fathers to take full paternity leave. So this is something that we're very proud of, and we're very unique as a pharmaceutical company to offer such generous benefits for creating families. Building families is our theme, our mission, and this is really what we live that at Ferring Pharmaceutical.
It's leading by example, you could say.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. This is the podcast Business Review Life Science, a podcast that focuses on innovation, challenges, and the future of health. Today's topic is involuntary childlessness, public-private partnerships as a catalyst for innovation. I'm your host, Søren Vejby. My guests today are Eva Hoffmann, Professor of Functional Genomics and Reproductive Health at University of Copenhagen, and also Kelle, Vice President of the Science and Medical Organization within Ferring Pharmaceuticals, Lead of Reproductive Medicine and Maternal Health, and Anette Steenberg, CEO, Medicon Valley Alliance. So if we look a little bit into the future here and see what has to be done, if I start with you, Eva, what do you see as the most urgent priorities in reproductive health innovation?
Capacity building. And that sounds perhaps a bit vague, but by that I mean that we need to start populating the basic research, as Kelle said earlier, because that's really missing, because if you don't have funding in the field, you can't discover new targets that might be druggable and that could advance our treatment and also just basically knowledge and diagnosis of infertility. So the capacity building in the basics, together with also the capacity building in innovation, and how we actually ensure that what we discover in the basic parts of the science and research that we do, that actually gets to live. And by that I mean that it has a fighting chance to be considered by companies such as Ferring, and that we can also work in that space. It sounds really easy to do an innovation project, and I just want to give some examples that it is not. Because it means that if you have EU funding and you have different rules in Sweden and Denmark, you need an organization such as Medicon Valley Alliance that Anette is CEO for to come in and help with the actual infrastructure so that we can concentrate on what's important, the core activities to try and populate this area of knowledge and also innovation. So this capacity building that we're doing started 15 years ago with ReproUnion. It started with exchange of patients between borders, and that in itself was a big achievement, so that, for example, girls who have cancer and have received treatment, they could also have their eggs preserved on the Danish side, even though that they were resident in Sweden. Similarly, there were also some studies and diagnostic tests that needed to be done on male who had certain types of infertility, and we could get those men here in Denmark, and we could send the actual material for analysis on the Swedish side. That was the first breakthrough that's very specific in terms of actually getting policy. Now, it took a long time to get there, a lot of effort from very, very committed clinicians and also administrators. But in the end, we got there. And now, 15 years later, we're at a stage where we're hoping to we're building an innovation platform with Ferring through MVA in order to try and facilitate that the academics understand what it is that the pharmaceutical industry needs, and that pharmaceutical industry, such as Ferring, that they can actually harness, or we together can harness the potential, at least, in terms of new ways of diagnosing and treating infertility.
Okay, I'm looking at you, Anette, because you said the ReproUnion has been working. You've done this for 15 years. There's a funding that is set to end in 2026, which is next year. What's at stake if support doesn't continue?
Well, I hope we'll find a way. I think everybody knows in these days that Europe really need to get our acts together when it comes to competition and innovation. We are lagging behind the US, we are lagging behind Asia, and if we don't pull ourselves together and start being better at collaborating, we have a serious problem. And that goes for this project as well. Denmark on its own, or Sweden on its own, are simply two small countries. And we have a lot of expertise here. And we have seen through this project that adding that expertise makes the pie grow larger. We make 1 + 1 become more than 2 by collaborating. And we need to be better at collaborating. So I'm convinced that both the EU, there will be possibilities in doing that. The challenge right now is, of course, there's some timing issue with all the new programs coming out of EU. But I truly believe that EU will be a strong catalyst for more collaboration across borders. But we also need local anchorage in this project. And that goes both from the Swedish and from the Danish side. And up until now, this has been a regional project, covering only the eastern part of Denmark and the southern part of Sweden. But when we talk about infertility, it doesn't stop at the regional borders. It's really interesting for all of Denmark, and it's interesting for all of Sweden, and of course beyond that as well. But if we just start locally, we hope that the Danish government and that the Swedish government, who also have a priority on infertility, will look at this fantastic and unique constellation of collaboration we have across border. It doesn't exist anywhere else. This biobank that Eva just talked about doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. So we are hoping that this will be of interest also for national governments to take advantage of this expertise and this biobank that we have.
All right. Looking at you also, Kelle, to answer a little bit here. So what kind of support or goodwill is needed from policymakers and industry players to shape the next era of reproductive health innovation?
I think prioritization of this is a societal concern and something that we need to investigate further and invest in. This is something that Ferring feels very strongly about from a societal level, and this is this is important. So prioritization and also a change in attitude, that we really need to start thinking it isn't just a female problem, it's male and female, and it's a very complicated trend that we're seeing that needs to be stopped.
So you underline the fact that the politicians need to get involved here. But what if our prime minister says, well, we already ticked that box off concerning infertility?
Well, I would say that our prime minister is partly correct, because I have to applaud her that she put fertility on the agenda. It has really become an important issue on the agenda. And the government also passed legislation so now that couples can get extra IVF trials, which is extremely positive. And I know my other country in our organization, Sweden is looking to Denmark to do maybe the same. So it's great news for a lot of couples who are aching to have their dream child or dream child number 2. However, it doesn't solve infertility, because we need to look also at root causes. We need to find out, can we prevent it, and how can we prevent it? And are there other solutions? Are there reasons why we are infertile? So it's a great option and opportunity for people wanting to have a child, but it doesn't stop the development of infertility. So we really need to go to the root causes here. And that's where we need funding for research, and also to scale it to become companies and make more innovations and innovative new treatments here.
This was an episode of the podcast BusinessReview Life Science. Our focus is innovation challenges and the future of health. Today's topic was involuntary childlessness, public-private partnerships as a catalyst for innovation. My guests today were Eva Hoffmann, Professor of Functional Genomics and Reproductive Health at University of Copenhagen, Denmark, Vice President of the Science and Medical Organization within Ferring Pharmaceuticals, Lead of Reproductive Medicine and Maternal Health, Kelle Moley, and Anette Steenberg, CEO Medicon Valley Alliance. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Søren.